Far to the south of New Zealand, where the sea roars endlessly and the winds never stop, lies a lonely, forgotten piece of land known as Campbell Island. It's a place few people have ever set foot on, a rugged, treeless landscape battered by storms and wrapped in fog. To most, it's just another dot on the map of the Southern Ocean. But for over a century, this island held a secret, a haunting story about thousands of sheep that were left behind to die. What happened to them would defy belief, but before we start, make sure to support our channel. Hit the like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you won't miss any new exciting stories. In the late 1800s, the world was filled with dreams of expansion. Colonies were growing, new lands were being claimed, and ambitious settlers were looking for opportunities wherever they could find them. Among these dreamers were farmers and entrepreneurs from New Zealand, eager to expand their livestock empire into the southern seas. Their eyes fell upon Campbell Island, a place so remote that it seemed almost untouched by human hands. The island was about 600 kilometers south of New Zealand's mainland, cold, wet, and constantly shrouded in mist. To the untrained eye, it looked wild and unwelcoming. But to these hopeful settlers, it was an open pasture waiting to be tamed. They brought with them a precious cargo, thousands of merino sheep, one of the most valuable breeds in the world, prized for its soft, fine wool. The plan seemed simple. Let the sheep graze on the island's grasses, collect the wool, and ship it back north to sell. It would be a small but profitable farming operation, at least that was the dream. For a brief moment, the dream seemed alive. The settlers built simple shelters, marked off fields, and began shearing the first flocks. But they soon realized they had made a terrible mistake. Campbell Island was no ordinary land. It was not a place meant for farming, it was a place meant to break the unprepared. The settlers discovered that almost every part of life there was a battle. Rain poured down almost every day, soaking the ground until it turned to deep, sticky mud. The grass that looked lush from a distance turned out to be coarse, sparse, and poor in nutrition. The island's rugged hills and rocky cliffs made herding almost impossible. And then there was the wind. It never stopped, a howling, freezing wind that could strip the warmth from a person's body in minutes. Winter brought storms so violent that they destroyed buildings, scattered livestock, and left the settlers trapped in isolation for months at a time. Ships bringing supplies couldn't always reach the island safely. The settlers ran out of food, tools, and medicine. Life became a struggle just to survive, and when the global economy shifted in the early 1900s, the already fragile farming operation collapsed entirely. By the 1930s, the last humans packed up and left the island for good. They left behind their equipment, their dreams, and their sheep. Thousands of them. When the ships sailed away, the sheep were left to their fate. There were no farmers to feed them, no fences to guide them, no shears to cut their wool. They were alone, stranded on a sub-Antarctic island with freezing winds, poor vegetation, and constant storms. At first, many of the sheep died. The conditions were too harsh. Without shelter or regular feeding, they succumbed to starvation, cold, and disease. But nature, in its brutal way, began to select the survivors. The strongest, the toughest, the most adaptable sheep survived. And slowly, over time, something extraordinary began to happen. Decade after decade, generation after generation, the sheep of Campbell Island began to change. With no humans to shear them, their thick merino wool became a problem. When it grew too long, it soaked up rainwater and mud, making the animals cold and heavy. Many sheep died that way in the first few generations. But among the survivors, a strange adaptation appeared. Some began to shed their wool naturally. Instead of growing endlessly, their coats started to fall off on their own during warmer months, a natural evolution that allowed them to survive the constant dampness. The sheep also began to breed earlier than domestic merinos, giving birth at younger ages, so they could maintain their numbers even when conditions were harsh. Their bodies changed too. They became smaller, tougher, and more muscular, built for endurance rather than comfort. Their wool became coarser, their faces sharper, and their instincts wilder. They no longer behaved like farm animals. They became feral, wild creatures of the island. In just a few decades, they had transformed into something entirely new, a breed shaped by nature, not by human design. And no one even knew they existed. For more than 40 years, Campbell Island remained largely forgotten. Only the occasional scientific expedition or passing ship ever came near its shores. But in the 1970s, something unexpected happened. A group of researchers arrived on the island as part of a survey of New Zealand's sub-Antarctic territories. They expected to find an empty, barren landscape. Instead, What they saw stunned them. Thousands of sheep roamed freely across the island's hills, untamed, wild, and thriving. They looked nothing like the merinos that had once been brought there. Their wool was uneven, their behavior aggressive and independent. Some were massive, others small and wiry. It was as if they had reverted to an earlier, more primitive form. But the scientists also noticed something troubling. The island itself was suffering. The sheep, in their thousands, were eating through every patch of vegetation they could find. The delicate mosses, native plants, and bird nesting grounds were being destroyed. The very ecosystem of Campbell Island, one of the most unique in the Southern Hemisphere, was collapsing under the weight of these survivors. The government of New Zealand faced a terrible dilemma. On one hand, the sheep were an ecological disaster. They had to be removed if the island's natural environment was to recover. On the other hand, they were a biological miracle, a living example of evolution in action. For decades, they had survived without human help, adapting to one of the most hostile environments on Earth. They were living proof of how quickly life could change when forced to face extreme isolation. After long debate, the decision was made. The majority of the sheep would have to be culled to save the island's ecosystem. But a small group of scientists and farmers were determined that the story of these animals wouldn't end in extinction. The culling began in the late 1970s and continued into the 1980s. Teams were sent to the island to reduce the population. It was a grim mission. Thousands of animals were killed. The once bustling hills grew silent again. For the second time in history, Campbell Island was being cleared, first of humans, now of the animals they had left behind. But before the last of the sheep were gone, a small number, just a few dozen, were captured and transported off the island. They were taken back to New Zealand's mainland for study and preservation. These were the last Campbell Island sheep, the final descendants of a forgotten experiment in colonization. Scientists were fascinated by what they found. The rescued sheep showed unique genetic traits, their ability to self-shed wool, resistance to cold and wet conditions, and breeding patterns suited to survival in extreme environments. Their DNA told the story of evolution compressed into just a few decades, something that usually takes thousands of years. For researchers, it was like finding a living time capsule. For farmers, it was a chance to preserve a rare and remarkable bloodline. Today, the descendants of those rescued sheep still exist not on Campbell Island, but in small, carefully managed flocks in New Zealand. Farmers and conservationists have maintained them as a genetic treasure, a reminder of how unpredictable nature can be. Their story is still studied by biologists who are amazed at how quickly they adapted, proving that evolution isn't always a slow process. Sometimes, it happens before our eyes when life has no other choice. Meanwhile, Campbell Island itself has recovered. Without the sheep grazing its hills, the island's native plants and birds have returned. The mosses are thick again, and the albatrosses have come back to nest. Nature, once again, found balance. But the memory of what happened there still lingers, a strange, haunting reminder of how human ambition can set events in motion that echo for generations. When the settlers brought their sheep to the island, they believed they were building a new future. When they abandoned them, they assumed they were leaving behind failure. But nature doesn't see things the way humans do. The sheep did not simply vanish. They transformed. They became something new shaped by wind, rain, and time. In a way, the island gave them freedom. No fences, no shears, no control, just the raw test of existence. They proved that even the most domesticated creatures, when faced with the full force of nature, can rediscover their wildness. And perhaps that's why their story continues to fascinate people today. It's both tragic and inspiring. A reminder that life, in all its forms, has an incredible will to survive. Their survival wasn't just luck. It was evolution written in real time, a breathtaking example of how life adapts when pushed to the edge. So next time you hear the bleat of a sheep or see a flock grazing on a quiet hillside, remember this story. Thank you for watching. Make sure to check our channel for more stories.